Welcome to the Holistical Podcast, your premier source for everything energy psychology, holistic health, wellness, and authentic living. We explore the wisdom of ancient traditions and lived experiences alongside insights from today's modern thought leaders and wellness professionals who are making a difference in the world through collaboration and intention. Tune in for stories and sage advice on how to have it all the holistic way.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Holistical Podcast. My name is Elizabeth Gillis and we're doing something a little different today. I am going to be interviewing the founder of this podcast, Kerri Vercellini. Hi Kerri.
Hi.
I'm not going to say welcome because this is your podcast, but it's nice to see you again.
Yes.
Kerri, you are the owner of Awaken Holistic Counseling Services.
Yes.
You have two locations.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is in Newburyport, Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one is in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Yes.
Can you give our listeners, our watchers, a little bit of information on how to better find you and some landmarks of what you might be near in both of your locations?
Yeah, absolutely. In Newburyport, where I had my first location founded, right now I am at 45 Pleasant Street, which is across from the big Unitarian Universalist Church, right on Pleasant Street. And it's also right above Pretty Poppy, which is a popular shopping destination for the locals. And then in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I am at the top as you're going up Bow Street alongside the waterfront decks where all the outside restaurants are by the waterfront. Once you go up the hill, right around the corner, I'm in a white building at the top at this time. And it could change in the future because the building is under some potential sale. But right now, that is where I am, and I love the space, so I'm going to get to stay.
The space is lovely. We are here in the Portsmouth location right now, and I've been to Newburyport, Massachusetts as well. They're both lovely areas to be a place to work.
And this is 132 Chapel Street, just in case people need to know.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked before, but I'm sure others are very curious about the background. Can you please tell us what it is that you're doing right now? And then I would love for you to explain to people and let people know how you got into what you're doing. What makes you so passionate about it?
Yeah. Right now, I am a completely holistic focused licensed mental health counselor. I got all my traditional training in the regular schools, and my license in community mental health was where I got all my practice with that in Lowell. And then after I left there, I went and opened my own practice and completely focused it on holistic information because I wanted to have more of a spiritual approach and to do more mind, body, spirit-based stuff. So that is the direction I went with that. And then in addition to doing therapy, which I love doing with my clients, I also am a certified Reiki 2 Usui line of Reiki. And I offer a special combined counseling session plus Reiki for a lot of my clients, and they really love that combination because I do like an hour of counseling followed by 30 minutes of some energy healing, and it just rounds out the whole day perfectly.
That's a win-win situation.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And then I also do EFT tapping. That is one of the things that a lot of people come to me for with trauma issues, especially people who are struggling with events and memories in their life that have really caused them a lot of emotional distress. I help them to learn this tool that we do in a therapeutic setting in my office, and I also teach them for the self-help at home.
How long have you been doing this? How long have you been in the counseling field?
Yep. I became a counselor when I went to do my pre-licensure work. It was in 2012. I did 4.5 years in community mental health, where I went into people's homes and helped them where they were there. And then after that, came to Newburyport and opened my own practice in officially 2016, but I moved into my own space March 2017.
You are doing this holistic counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain to the people who are listening exactly what sets you apart from maybe what you were doing before, and how this is different from your previous approach, and how it differs from a traditional type of counseling therapy or counseling service?
In my holistic therapy approach, I definitely look at the entire whole person picture. In traditional therapy, you learn about symptomology, you learn about diagnostic codes, you learn about behavior pictures that don't really add up to much actual scientific basis of anything. It's all very guessing, and it didn't really leave me with a lot of actual knowledge of how to help individual clients when they come to me. When I worked with people in Lowell, I felt very helpless, especially in a crisis type of experience where a lot of the people that I worked with were struggling. I didn't feel like I really had a lot of tools to offer them. And so I felt helpless as a therapist who was supposed to know how to help them, because they were experiencing all these symptoms. I couldn't interrupt. I couldn't figure out how to make them feel better. They just had to get there by talking it out. If you weren't talking, then you weren't getting anywhere. Let me take it back a little bit. You did ask me this question earlier, so I'll go back to my history. I actually always knew that I wanted to be a therapist. When I was 16, somebody close to me had an issue in their family where they found out that their sibling was being abused for 10 years and nobody had known. And that child, who was a teenager at the time, when he came out about the abuse and talking about sexual abuse within the family, he was prescribed a bunch of medications. He had been receiving services, but nobody figured out that that was what was going on for him. And so he was really misdiagnosed for a long time and was actually treated with medications for a long time that were not appropriate for what was really going on. And when that happened, and I saw the impact that it had not only in that person, but also the entire family when this person finally went to jail for this, it really impacted me, because I just didn't want kids to go through that experience of not being able to share what was truly going on for them. And at that time, when it was before I was 16 years old, it was 8th grade that this all happened, and that really impacted me to the point by the time I was 16, I knew that I was going to be a therapist.
Wow, that's amazing at such a young age
because
to know what your vision is for what you want to do.
Yeah, because I knew that I wanted to help kids not go through the same thing. So I actually thought I was going to be a child therapist, a child psychologist when I first went into school. And then I went through all the program, the typical regular psychology program, and at the end graduated. And I took a break for about a year because I have ADHD. I was totally done with school. I did not have an easy time being in school. I was on medication for ADHD. I had support services in place. I had a IEP in 6th grade all the way through high school. I had a 504 plan in my undergraduate to get my bachelor's degree. And so it was a long journey. And I was just like, you know what, I'm done. I just want a break. So I took a year off thinking that I was going to live up life, gained about 15 pounds, and then became miserable. And I was finally ready to go back to school and actually go for my counseling degree. I went to Riviera College in Nashua, New Hampshire.
I went to college too.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually did my undergrad in Colby Sawyer College up in New Hampshire, and then I did my graduate degree at Riviera College in Nashua, New Hampshire. Well, it was college, now it's university. I enrolled there, and when I did my interview at the place, they asked why I wanted to do child psychology, and I said I don't want to work with any persistent mental health stuff, and I really don't think I want to work with a lot of the adult stuff just because it's too complicated, whatever. And my department head actually pushed me on that a little bit and was like, well, why don't you want to work with that? And I was like, well, because I just don't feel like I'm equipped for that. And at the time, I did have some close family situations going on where there was persistent mental health stuff going on that I didn't know how to handle. And so it really pushed me away from exploring that. But she challenged me, and she said, you know what? You want to help multiple types of people. You want to help kids. I can tell you, if you want to work with kids, you're going to work with the adults because they have parents. And it's often the parents that are the challenges with the children. So you're going to have to work with adults regardless. And I was like, oh, great. But then, in being pushed because of that, she's like, you know what, I really think you should go into mental health counseling instead of child psychology. And I said, okay, I'll trust you. You know the programs. And so I decided to go in mental health. And through that, I learned more about family therapy. I learned about couples therapy. I learned about child psychology, and then I realized, okay, I really don't want to do child psychology because you mostly deal with the parents, and the parents are less willing to change than the children. So today, actually, I do work with families. Ironically, all the things that I had some resistance to ended up coming up in my journey to have to actually face.
Funny how that can be,
Right?
right? Life pushes you in a
Right?
certain direction, like it or not. Strap on,
Exactly.
because here it comes.
Exactly. So I learned about all of that stuff in my graduate degree. And actually, when I went into my grad school, I went in there feeling like maybe I don't need support services at this point. I'm on medication, I'm stable for my ADHD. I feel like I've got a pretty good understanding of what my needs are. So I actually just set up the backup plan of support services. If I need you, I'll reach out to you stuff. I actually didn't end up needing those supports when I was in my grad school. And I share the story because I know a lot of people with ADHD feel like they're up against a huge wall of, can I be successful in the world? And I can tell you anybody can do it if I can do it. I was probably a 2.45 GPA in high school. And when I got to grad school in a direction of something that came naturally to me and actually felt like it was the right journey for me, I ended up graduating with a 4.0 with no support services, just some medication. If I can do it, you can do it out there, and sky's the limit as long as you set your mind to something and you set up the right structures for yourself and the right tools that you need to have in place. You can really do whatever you want. And now I'm a business owner with 2 offices, and I'm off medication at this point. I've been off medication since 2020, and I used homeopathy to get off of my medication that I was on for 18 years, and successfully have been off of it since then. It's all possible for anybody who is wanting some of that encouragement. But anyway, after I graduated with my graduate degree, I was actually handpicked out of college to get a job at my first job in Lowell for South Bay, and South Bay turned into South Bay Community Services eventually. I really loved that job. I had a great experience working with all the clients that I had, invaluable exposure to all different types of things. But when I showed up, like I said, things that I had some resistance to, they put me on the dual diagnosis team. Which,
tell me about the dual diagnosis team. I've never heard of that.
I thought I was going to be in the family team because I wanted to work with kids. They put me on the dual diagnosis team, which means co-occurring mental health disorders and drug addiction. And I was like, I have no experience with drugs. I have none. Like, I didn't even have personal experience with drugs. And I'm like, how am I supposed to help these people? And for whatever reason, they decided to push me forward in this. And they're like, nope, this is the right place for you. I'm like, okay, as long as you help me figure out what to do here. And again, ended up being the right fit for me. I ended up being a really great fit for people that were struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. And they do say sometimes with a LADAC, I don't know if you've ever heard of a LADAC.
No, can you tell us what that is?
A LADAC is somebody who acquires a licensed drug and alcohol addiction counselor. And in Massachusetts, typically those people work for places like a Habit OpCo, which is a methadone clinic or something like that. And so they counsel people who are in throes of opiate addiction typically, and they are their accountability person, counselor, that they show up to weekly and they have sessions with to check in on their sobriety and all that stuff. And historically, and AA also says this typically, people who haven't been through it don't know how to help people who are going through it. And what I experienced in the work that I was doing was that really wasn't the case. I feel like I actually had a great experience with a lot of people that struggled with drug addiction because I felt like I could, and I don't know if this is just because I'm an intuitive professional, that I could hold the space without the baggage.
Without your own personal story or your own emotions coming in to the picture and possibly blurring.
Yes, having some transference issues.
Right.
And a lot of LADACs come from their own personal background of drug addiction and issues with that stuff. They feel like that's more helpful because people get it. But in my experience, and I'm not saying that it's true for everybody this way, but in my experience, I feel like it gave me a very clear head and a clear experience, so that I wasn't involved in the other person's experience, and I didn't have to justify whatever I was saying to the other
So
person.
you weren't being triggered or
I wasn't being
having
triggered
to be cautionary because
Exactly.
if I said it that way, that would bother me if someone said it to me, and that
Yeah.
would remind me of all these other things.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So I came in as a blank slate,
Yeah.
and I was able to hold space for these people that really had a lot of wounds, that had a lot of challenges. And what I noticed in working with the substance addicted population was that most people who are in the throes of that stuff have a lot of trauma history, a lot of issues with family upbringing, a lot of issues with attachment figures, a lot of just challenges overall with socioeconomic stuff, and those things greatly contribute to addiction.
So I have to say that in the practice that I have, as you work with a lot of these people, and regardless of what they've done or what they're doing in their lives, you sit there and you come from a place of, well, why did they become this way? Why are they doing that?
Yeah.
I remember doing a class specifically with the founder of what I do, and he said, how many of you in this room refuse to work with the child molesters? How many of you refuse to take them on as clients? He goes, I personally would like to physically abuse them myself, but the truth is they need rehabilitation, and it's your responsibility to help them so that they don't harm people down the road. And that really stuck with me, right? And so you start to learn over time that this may not be their fault, that it comes from another source, and you need to find what that source is in order to get them better.
And I'm so glad that I have worked now in hindsight. I'm so glad I went down that journey in working with the dual diagnosis population, because especially today with all of the opiate crisis that we have going on, I can really speak to how we address this, which I really didn't feel like I was prepared for with my traditional education. I really don't. But when I went on, after I left my pre-licensure work at that agency, I went on to start my own business, and that's when I discovered energy psychology. And energy psychology.
Yes, please tell us all about energy psychology. There's probably a lot of people listening that have never even heard of energy psychology. So can you please expand on that to have people really understand what that means?
Yes. Energy psychology is, in my perspective and in many other people's perspectives, especially in this field, the next fifth wave of psychology. We're getting into an area in our culture where people are starting to realize that it's not just mental health stuff. It's not just a symptom that needs a pill. There is a whole body experience going on with all the distress that people are experiencing today. And so energy psychology addresses just that. We look at the mind, body, spirit approach to mental health and trauma specifically in a somatic way. So we're working with the physiological body to target where symptoms are stuck in the energy field, and then we help to reprogram them and release them so that they no longer create those distresses.
So I, in my own mind, can picture what that might look like. But could you describe to the people listening what that might look like if you had to do that for someone in your practice?
Yeah, so the practice that and there's many different energy psychology modalities, energy psychology practices, and different names for techniques. And thankfully, on my program, I will be sharing with you a lot of these different energy psychology practices and interviewing the experts on these practices so that you get a better understanding. But the one that I use most in my practice is emotional freedom techniques, tapping. And at this point, I am in the trauma-informed care level of that. So when I have a client come in who is dealing with some emotional traumas from their past, we will engage the physical and physiological body by finding these spots that I've been taught to help people tap on. So there's one on the top of your head, there's one on the inside of your eyebrow, outside of the eye, underneath the nose, under the mouth, collarbone, and under the arm. And when you tap on these, and the side of the hand, when you tap on these spots while engaging in the thoughts about something that's feeling distressing, it's been shown in our scientific studies so far that this sends stimulation through the openings. It's like there's a little spot on the meridian that is an easier opening in these spots, so that it sends a signal with the touch stimulation, but also, very interesting, we emit light from our fingers.
I did not know that.
Yes. So you can actually find out more about this with Kerlian photography. You can search that online. Kirilian, Kerlian photography. They've done images in complete darkness with this special camera of hands of leaves, and it shows that we emit light from our body around it.
So that's kind of like Wei Chi. So if you've never heard of Wei Chi, that is people who practice martial arts. They have very strong Wei Chi. So it's almost like our Teflon coating that protects our body from damage. And in Body Talk, we use it a lot. It's actually a faster mode of communication of getting information from one part of the body to another than even the nervous system.
Wow.
And so that is why when people are practicing martial arts, they can break boards and they don't get injured because their Wei Chi, their force field, is so strong that it has the ability to impact and break the material before it actually touches the physical body.
That's why it's so easy to break some of those boards then.
Because the more they practice, the stronger their Wei Chi. It's almost like that force field. I call it the person's Teflon coating.
Gotcha.
And sometimes it can get damaged, but the same type of thing. If you have the right material, you can actually see the Wei Chi of somebody's body that hovers just above the skin, on the skin, and just below the skin surface.
Very interesting.
So that's fascinating.
Yeah. So they estimate that also with the emitting light from your fingers, that going into those spots also enhances the response of the nervous system. So when we are tapping on these spots, we are engaging the nervous system, the vagus nerve, that is the fight-flight response in our body, sends signals up and down through all of our organs. And when we are interrupting that flow, so as you're thinking of a distressing memory or event, it's got a flow of energy going on in your body. It's causing your nervous system to kick up. And as you tap on those spots, it sends this disrupting signal to interrupt the flow, and it jolts it out of place and allows it to reprogram in a different way. So when I discovered that method, I was like, oh my goodness, like I wish I had this when I was in Lowell.
Right.
I could have helped so many more people with all the trauma
Well,
that was in
even
Lowell.
Even everyday life. I mean, how many people could who could benefit from something like that?
Yep.
Even in their own stressors, and just break that program, because that's really, we don't want it to stick. We don't want that program to stick.
Yeah.
So interrupting it is really great, and you've integrated that into your practice to help that one more piece, right?
Yes.
One more wonderful piece
Yep.
to help people in a way that maybe conventional approaches aren't able to help.
Yes. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's really interesting.
And then I haven't mentioned yet how I got into this perspective in general. So I started actually in my early 20s getting exposed to spiritual types of ideas. I took my first Reiki class when I was in my early 20s. I started getting exposed to law of attraction. And since I was exposed to law of attraction, I applied it, and it worked so successfully. I was like, well, I'm going to do this for a lot of things. So I used it for getting the car that I wanted, for acquiring apartments that I wanted to live in, for meeting my partner, my husband.
You were really
now.
good at it.
I'm really good at doing all this manifestation. So I actually also made a commitment to myself that I was going to teach clients that in my counseling practice as well. So a lot of what I do with clients is help them to wake up their intuition, that then partners with their ability to tap into sensing, like for signs and for figuring out what their personal goals and needs are, so that they can start to manifest those things, get those energy blocks taken care of, whether it's through an energy psychology practice or in just shifting their mind. And what I actually discovered in using the law of attraction for so long, and also having a mental health background, was that the law of attraction really is cognitive reprogramming. So it's just another way of shifting how you think about certain things. And my personal favorite resource for law of attraction stuff is Abraham Hicks materials. I just have felt that they've always made everything so easy to understand, and wherever you're seeking something, you typically always find what you need to hear when you're seeking it.
I find the law of attraction to be so interesting because you and I have had conversations of just that felt sense of just knowing.
Yep.
Just knowing that this is what I need to do, knowing that this is where I need to go. And when no is not an option, like not doing it is not an option.
Yeah.
And
Can't
somehow
ignore it. Yeah.
everything ends up
Working.
happening because you just know that this is something that needs to happen.
Yep.
And there's no if, ands, or buts about it. You're
Yep.
going to find a way. And the universe, if you want to call it that, responds to that and opens up the floodgates to make that easier for you to accomplish whatever it is or to achieve whatever it is that you want or to get whatever it is that you want.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about winning the lottery here,
No,
but
winning
you know,
at life, yes.
yes, because that's personal goals and
Yes.
accomplishments and those types of things, which is very different from, I just want to win $1 billion so that, you can actually work towards something.
Yep. And listening to that inner guidance is so important. If I had ignored all the things that I felt compelled to do, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I know that's what a lot of people do experience. They feel so stuck and they feel helpless to actually take the steps into their life. And my encouragement to people is to just take this first small step you can, because it might cause a ripple that can create a whole scenario, situation that you couldn't even expect would happen from that one little ripple. But there's so much that's possible for people in their life. And so a big part of what I do in my work is empowering people to step into their power and listen, reconnect with their intuition. I believe we're all born with intuition, and then we get conditioned out of it by the living situation that we're in. You know, if you have a household with parents that are very controlling or overly permissive, neglectful, anything like that, you then typically, in my experience and my observation when working with people, learn to shut off your intuition at an early age just for survival. And so a lot of the people that I work with, I have to help them reconnect to their intuition.
Yeah, because it's a protective factor, right?
Again.
Because, right, exactly. They learn that whatever they're feeling or what they're drawn to can't possibly be right.
Yes. Well, and when you feel like something's wrong and then your environment tells you, no, this is because we love you that we're doing this, and then they're hurting you. Or if you go this way, you're going to get into trouble, but your body's saying, no, but this is going to be really good for you. How are you?
There's a lot of confusion.
Exactly.
There's a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
And even for personal growth and development later on, I have found in my own practice, because I work with people with personal growth and development as well, they're trying so hard to be successful in their business and they can't be because of those exact types of situations, right? They had this draw to do this and the parents were like, no, don't do that. Your ideas aren't good. Like, what are you thinking? Go do this and this. And then that interrupts that ability for them to manifest things and that law of attraction.
And they start to doubt themselves.
And they start doubting themselves, or they start having self-sabotage that prevents them from being successful, and they don't even realize where it comes from.
Yeah. All those old narratives, the early, and actually the fascinating stuff that I keep coming across in the work that I do, I just keep learning all these new, really cool things. I'm trying to remember, who was it? Bruce Lipton, I think, that talked about how our subconscious receives all of its programming before age 6. So everything that you learn before age 6 then gets encoded in the body as your natural, normal operation.
Right. So because Bruce Lipton has talked about body talk, but John Valtheim also has said the most important years are from 1 to 5.
Yeah.
So all of the examples that you're going to give to your children, all of the things that you say to them, all of the examples that you set for them, that is like 80% of their foundation that's going to base the rest of their lives on.
Yeah.
So it's amazing.
And then once you have all of that established, yes, you can change it. It just takes a lot more mental energy to change the subconscious programming. And with extra energy tools and so on, you can tap into that a little easier to help to reprogram. So things like EFT, things like body talk, that can help to interrupt those old narratives that are so ingrained.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've spoken to my clients. It's like if you talk to pretty much anyone, you'll say, well, you know what the right thing is to do. Right? But why do you keep dating that wrong person? Why do you keep making those food choices? Everybody is intelligent.
Yeah.
We all know most of the time of what we do, what is right or wrong. But what is driving that bus that causes you to still have those patterns to do those things.
Yeah.
Self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And that's subconscious,
Yeah.
because there's like an elephant that's pulling the cart,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just the little guy on the back trying
Yep.
to stop it from going.
Yep.
And it's very, very difficult to do, and it does take a lot of work
Yep.
if you don't have that foundation to support it,
Mhm.
you know, in a healthy way.
Yeah. So this actually leads me to another thing that's a little bit of a jack of all trades of many different things. So one of the other things that I actually made a few years ago was a couple of dating courses.
Oh,
Yeah,
tell us
so
more
you
about
don't know
that.
anything
That
about
sounds a
that,
little
yeah.
fun. No, I don't know anything.
So I actually based my dating, I just, again, downloaded a dating course based on my own lived experience. I was single for about 10 years when I was going through college and everything. Being ADHD, I couldn't manage doing relationship, getting my schooling degrees all at the same time. So I didn't date for a long time. Then I had a long distance relationship that was, in hindsight, it was really important for me to have gone through, but I thought that it was more aligned than it ended up being. I think there was definitely some sort of past life connection there to a Native Hawaiian, was my ex. And when it ended, it was very interesting because my body got involved in the ending of this relationship. I reached a precipice in which I couldn't put up with anymore, of just being disrespected and not cared for in the way that I was expecting them to care for me. And I ended up letting him hear everything.
Oh, okay.
Over text.
Oh.
And then being like, I'm done. And then after that happened, it was like a day or two later, I manifested a very strange illness. I ended up actually having a ruptured ovarian cyst.
Oh my goodness.
That ruptured a blood vessel, and it caused me to go septic. And
Oh
so
my
I almost
goodness.
died, actually,
Wow.
from this. It was on Halloween. Now,
Gosh, almost died from a breakup.
right? Almost died from a
But not a
breakup.
big a broken heart.
No,
Yeah,
but
different.
the interesting thing was, the day that this happened was on the anniversary of the day I flew into Hawaii. That's why I was just like,
The consciousness of the ovaries is released as well.
So in my release of all of my emotions towards this person, I had some energetic release in my body that caused a manifest of a physical illness. And ironically, when I became septic, I knew I was going to be fine. I was in the hospital. I was pale as a ghost. I was in a lot of pain, but I was like, I'm fine. I'm going to be fine.
I just knew it.
I just knew it. And then after that, I lost like 35 pounds
Wow.
in the next 2-3 months without doing anything. Like I was starting
So
to
you
go
were-
into my business,
so
but
it
it
almost-
was just like I slid
You know,
down into the
it
person I
almost
was going to
sounds
become.
like you were holding the relationship sound like it was toxic,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
therefore your body was holding on to
Holding on
toxins
to.
because what do
Mhm.
fat cells do? They hold toxins.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So
My
Wow, is it-
my sacral chakra released a bunch of stuff.
yeah, and you got
And then
rid of
I
all
just,
the
like,
toxin that you were
Yep.
holding on to
Yep.
from the relationship, and you were able to
Yep.
slim down and
Yep.
get
And then-
healthier
and then get to be in the body that I always felt like was in there, but I never could access it before. And then I was my ideal self when I finally came to Newburyport.
Isn't that kind of cool?
Right? How
like-
that all happens,
Yeah,
right?
how that all happens.
Yeah. So then by the time I went into Newburyport, I was still doing some healing of my own personal journey. And I sought out my own Reiki practitioner that helped to clear out some of that extra energy and so on. And that person actually really helped to emotionally heal my worthiness wound by just sharing, because it was a male practitioner
Mhm.
who just really imparted to me, like, you are worthy of a healthy masculine relationship. And
Yeah.
I finally could just receive
Yeah, and
that.
what does a healthy masculine
Right.
energy look like and
Right.
feel like?
Yeah.
Right?
And I just had never experienced that before.
So you talked about getting Reiki.
Yes.
And I just assume, because I'm trained in Reiki as
Mhm.
well, the same method that you
Yeah.
practice, I just assume that because Reiki seems to be very well known, at least in the New England area where
Mhm.
we are,
Yes.
but there may be people listening that don't know anything about
Yeah.
Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give
Share
a
a
little
little bit more.
description
Yeah.
of, since this is something that you offer
Yeah.
as a co-companionship
Yeah,
to
yeah.
your therapy,
Mhm.
like what does it do for people? How can it help them? What
Yeah.
is the basis of Reiki? Can you explain some of that?
So I did not study closely enough to know all the basis pieces, but I can certainly tell you what my experience was and what I do with clients. I was attuned into the second level of Reiki. So when you first do your first Reiki training, you get attuned to open up to receiving higher consciousness knowledge and channeling energy. And so through the hands, you can transmit energy and light, as I was talking about earlier, to another person to help balance their energy flow in their body. And in the trainings that I continue to go on to, I learned how to reset and release chakras in the body, which I'll talk a little bit more about in another episode with the different energy types of bodies and centers that we have. But learned how to reset and release chakras for people. And in my process personally, because I'm such an intuitive person, I get a lot of imagery that comes through. And so one of the benefits that I share with my clients is I offer up for them to hear what imagery or symbols that I might have acquired in the process of doing Reiki. And a lot of people find that's fun for them to just take into account. So take it with a grain of salt. Doesn't mean it's the be all end all, but it might help to kind of like consider when thinking about influences and maybe taking a couple of extra steps.
It's really interesting because in some of my training when I was doing, of all things, anatomy and physiology in the body talk system and learning lymphatic drainage, is I learned how much the brain loves images. So if you're conjuring up images and you're doing imagery, it's way more powerful than the spoken word or words or things like that. The brain loves it, and it just really can respond very easily to seeing images, or almost like a telepathy between the practitioner and the patient or the client. Yeah, so that's...
So in my experience with clients when I do these and kind of readings in a way, what I feel like I'm getting is their energy field is talking to me about things, themes, things to be aware of, and they're coming through in my kind of encyclopedia in my head of what imagery,
your filters,
my filters that would bring me to those awarenesses to be able to communicate those things to those people. And again, I think most of the people that I work with find it fascinating, and I look forward to being able to take notes.
Do you do like I do? Well, this is my interpretation of what I'm seeing.
So I say,
your body may
you
have
let
a whole
me know
different
if this
story.
makes sense for you or not, and take what works, leave what doesn't. So that's a fun part. But going back to the dating thing, when I met my husband in Newburyport, I was doing a lot of law of attraction stuff after I'd done some healing with my Reiki practitioner. And we synced up on Bumble, so success dating on an app. And I really liked Bumble because Bumble puts you as a woman in the power position, so you get to initiate conversations, especially for...
That must be refreshing.
Yes.
Thankfully, I am for the whole dating app thing. My husband and I have been together for 30 years. But
it can be overwhelming.
I'm sure.
So the way that women and men approach dating is totally different. So women will go through and they will assess all the specific profiles that they like, and they'll go and read through and they'll see if they feel like their ideals match and so on and so forth. And if they really like the person well enough, then they will send them a message, and then they'll wait. If the woman is confident enough to actually send a message to a guy, or I'm not sure how it works on gay and lesbian profiles, but I'm assuming it's something similar. If you're going to take the action, you're confident enough to reach out. Whereas guys, typically, from my experience and from what I've heard, tend to cast a wide net. So they'll look at a picture, they'll assess based on the picture whether or not they might be interested in them at all, based on their physical attraction at first, and then they'll just shoot out a message real fast that's not really personalized. They won't even look at the profile until they get a response back from the woman, and then they'll go back and they'll look at the profile. So they cast the wide net like they're fishing, and then they'll see what they catch, and then they'll reel it in, and they'll see if they want to keep it.
Yeah, I just want to bring up something that I heard once, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it seems like it could be, is that women have the ability to fall in love after they've been in a relationship with someone, where men, if they're not in love right away, then it's never going to happen for them.
I wouldn't be surprised by that, for the reason that I also think that women tend to convince themselves that something may be a good fit for them when they may not actually be a good fit for them.
Interesting.
I think our culture, at least this is just my personal opinion and my clinical assessment from my relationship experiences and my clinical work, is that women tend to, especially because they nurture by nature, they tend to make excuses for things. They tend to listen to other people around them too, being like, well, you can't have everything you want. So you might as well rest some of those expectations, blah, blah, blah. You want somebody instead of nobody, right? Women are more likely, I think, to settle when it comes to long-term relationships. Not saying that everybody does, but I think our culture kind of programs us into accepting behaviors that oftentimes shouldn't be acceptable.
Yeah, the
Just to
bar
be
isn't
partnered.
necessarily as
Exactly.
high, and
Yeah, just to be partnered. And for women, instinctively, I think that's also for safety reasons. Like if they're with somebody, then they're more safe than if they're alone.
I mean, that
instinctively.
makes sense.
And then, of course, add in family upbringing and what the background behaviors
Oh,
that
the
you
background, the
experienced and
subconscious,
observed and all that stuff. You got all those extra layers.
Yep.
So with the dating situation, me and my husband met, and I felt like it was an instant, like my body knew this was the right person.
He's the right
He
one.
was the one. And on our second date, we actually became a couple, and we got off the apps.
Wow.
And within 6 weeks, we knew that we wanted to live together. It was ridiculous. And then now we are married, coming up on, was it 3 years 3 years this summer, and we have a 2-year-old, and she's just a joy. And I took my success with finding my partner and aligning law of attraction wise with him, and I looked at how is this different from what I was taught or exposed to in our culture. I looked at the different things that I did, and I really drummed it down to 5 different keys to finding successful online romance, and I put that into a little workshop that I did. And then when I created that workshop, I then after that came up with a couple of other dating programs. So I came up with a program called 5 Weeks to Successful Online Romance. And then there was another one that came after the fact, but became like this actually might be your first way if you don't feel like you're ready to actually date and find the right person. Because I did experience when people took that course that they realized that they actually weren't ready to date.
Oh.
They wanted to be ready.
So then you had the pre-dating
They
workshops.
wanted to be ready, but they realized in the program that they weren't ready because they weren't healed enough to find the right partner. So then after that, I created the Loving Me First program, and blanking on the end part of that name right now, but the Loving Me First program, which helps you to focus on loving yourself before you welcome in the partner that you really want to be with, so that you can get in alignment enough so that you can meet the right partner instead of attracting the same old bad partners over and over again. So I have one successful marriage under my belt with this programs already, and I only released them in, I think I created them in 2019, and then COVID happened. So I had one successful bout of that
time of
that
our
time
lives.
of our lives. So I had one successful bout of string of those programs. And then in the midst of all that, one of my students did get married to a partner that they found through the help of the program. And now those programs are on hiatus just because I'm too busy, and it's a big consumption of my time to do it. But I do personalized courses for that. So if somebody is really wanting to pursue this, wanting to go through the course and stuff like that, and they don't want to wait around because I don't know when the next one is going to be, they can hire me personally for a privatized
That's
package
great.
to do this.
That's
Yeah.
great. So one more thing that we didn't
One
know.
thing that you didn't know that I do.
Yeah, that you help
Yep.
people find their true loves.
Yes. Yep. And someday I'm going to write a
So
book.
you're
I haven't
almost
gotten
like a
there
fairy godmother.
yet. kind of. Yeah. Haven't written the book yet. I will eventually probably turn my courses into a
So
book.
the next podcast, please bring your little magic wand.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a kind of a good snapshot. So another big thing that I haven't mentioned yet for the audience, but we've talked a little bit about, is when I got involved with energy psychology, I did discover an organization that specialized in this. And this organization has been really paramount to my success as a therapist who is going into a non-traditional route of therapy. So if you are a therapist listening to this and you are considering trying to switch gears from the traditional route, I highly recommend that you check out this organization because they will support you in figuring this out. So the organization is called the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. They are based out of Pennsylvania currently, although I think we're going to be going remote a little bit. It is a California-based 501c3, and then their home office has recently been in Pennsylvania. The organization has probably about 1,700 members now that are worldwide. So we have, I think, 9 to 12 countries involved in the
Wow.
organization.
Okay, so it's growing.
It's
That's a
growing.
pretty good number.
Yep. And we do have humanitarian aid that comes through this organization. The organization specializes in trauma research in energy psychology, as well as treating trauma in energy.
So there's
energy
resources
psychology.
that
There's resources.
therapists and counselors could dip into to
Yep.
help their own clients. And
Yep.
are there courses, are there workshops that
So there's
people
courses,
can take?
and it's not just for therapists. I want to make that very
Oh,
clear. It's
okay.
actually, the thing that's very unique about ASAP is that it welcomes all types of healing professionals.
That's
If you are
very good to know.
licensed or unlicensed, you can be a member of this organization. So we have everything from chiropractors to nurses to doctors to therapists to physical therapists to energy healers to shamans to whatever you can think of.
That
under
is
the sun.
so unusual for them to be
Yeah.
open to so many
All
different,
different, yep.
diverse.
And I can tell you, it makes the conferences so enjoyable because you get to
The diversity.
cross-pollinate with so much diversity. It's so interesting and exciting to connect with the different variety of people that come to
The
this
different
organization.
perspectives
The
that are
different
brought in.
perspectives.
That's amazing.
It provides such a wealth of knowledge. And so this organization really helped me to develop my credibility in my therapy practice so that I can help clients the way that I do. And with their help, I have brought one of the scientific researchers to the United States to speak to my local community. So her name is Peta Stapleton, or Peta Stapleton. She was doing a U.S. tour a few years back. When I became the Massachusetts state rep for ASAP, that was part of my goal. I had 2 or 3 goals where I wanted one to be that I brought an expert to speak to my area about energy psychology. Another goal I had was to bring a training to Massachusetts on energy psychology. And the third one, I think, was to build up, my local group or something, which that ended up fizzling out. But the other 2 I did successfully achieve. They brought the CEP, Comprehensive Energy Psychology Program, to Boston, Massachusetts in 2019, I believe. 2018? Yeah, 2019.
Before the pandemic.
Before the pandemic. It was the last one that we did in person. And now the CEP program is on hiatus because they're reworking the ins and outs of it. But the CEP program went well. We did 2 levels there in Boston, and then Peta Stapleton came to Newburyport at my request and spoke to my community of 90 people for free.
Wow.
Of
That's
90
amazing.
For free on her research that she had just finished doing on the first fMRI studies on the before and after effects of tapping on the brain with food cravings and addiction. And so she brought up her slides with the fMRI images of the brain and showed the different areas that lit up and didn't light up versus before and afters from the
Wow.
tapping. It's fascinating information. And so she did a great job there. I'm so glad that she was willing to do that. And she will be interviewed again in this podcast.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. I did that with them. And today I have grown my involvement in the organization. I am now on the board of directors of this organization that's international. And I am currently the youngest person, and I'm also the Northeast region rep for this organization. So anybody that is within Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, I am the hub for that organization. So I'm your resource person if you are interested in
So
joining
that
this
means
organization.
if anybody is in a more conventional
Mhm.
therapy business,
Yep.
I guess is what
Yep.
I would call it, or practice,
Mhm.
so they could actually reach out to you
Yep.
if they were interested in becoming a more holistic
Yes.
oriented
Yep.
therapist or counselor.
Yep.
And you would be able to guide them as to where to go, what to do, the resources in order to get that ball rolling.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
So I can help you get connected to the right people in ASAP if you are looking to become more familiar with that information and be a member. And if you want personalized help in creating your business and working with building a plan and all that stuff, I actually do business consultations also for holistic businesses.
You're just
So,
you're
like I
just a
said, I'm
big
a jack of all
surprise bag.
trades.
You're a big surprise bag today. It's like, grab in there and what are you going to pull out? Something you didn't already know.
And then I also do occasionally, like I have one coming up soon, I do community workshops for free to teach the palliative version of tapping to the community.
Wow. And where, like, do you teach those in Newburyport and
so I
Portsmouth?
teach, I teach them wherever I'm called to on the seacoast. So right now I have one coming up, and right now as we're talking, it is January 11th of 2025. So,
is that a weekend? Is that a
so
weekday?
it's coming up on, I believe, February 2nd on a Sunday at Newbury Library in Byfield, Mass. And that's going to be a free workshop for people to come and attend and just learn the palliative version of this. I also will be coming to the Northampton Library a couple of weeks later to teach the same workshop.
Wow.
So I've been having some libraries reach out recently to become a speaker to just share this workshop, just from hearing in the grapevine of how well another one went at another library. So they're like, yeah, please come, teach this.
They speak to each other, those libraries.
Yeah. So when I went into my business, because I am private pay, I knew that because I worked in Lowell, I have a soft spot for people who are struggling financially and so on. And I know that not everybody can work with me, although I do have a sliding scale that's pretty reasonable for the amount of information that I can offer you and quality of work that I do with clients. I do also want to always offer things that are free and that are low cost to people, because I know that sometimes that can be a barrier to accessing this type of information, and I don't want to be discriminatory to people receiving these really helpful tools. So that I have committed, unless I am requested specifically to go into a business, I offer these community workshops for free in public spaces. And that's really to just spread the awareness and spread the tool as far as it can.
Well, that just shows how passionate you are about sharing this information and getting it out to the public.
It is so helpful. It literally changes lives, this one tool. And
how long do these workshops last? So the workshops that you do that are free to the public, how long do they last?
So each of those workshops that I conduct are 90 minutes. So I do a full sciencey background teaching how this works and why it works. And I even show a diagram of the meridians, and these meridians are all connected to these points and so on. Here's the vagus nerve. This is what the vagus nerve does. And all these very important pieces, in my opinion, to understanding why this stuff works. And what I found is when people apply something that they don't understand why or how it works, then they don't use it effectively.
Right, because they don't understand it, and therefore they can't see the value of it, and they're not going to see how it can help.
Yes, yeah. So I'm passionate about making sure that they have the right information to empower them to feel more confident in using the method. So I take an hour and 30 minutes to just share with people the background. I practice the method with them in the actual workshop so that they get to understand where the points are. I help them find them accurately, because that can sometimes be confusing. And then if there's time and somebody's willing, I sometimes will pull people up from the audience. So I've had really good reviews of those workshops. People find it fascinating, a really helpful tip to just take home with them and use it for their own self-care.
Wonderful. How long have you been a holistic therapist?
So when I got my license, I knew that I had no designations to get my shingle out, so I decided to go and take unfortunately non-accredited, but still valuable for the label, program on holistic psychotherapy and coaching. And I felt like with my certification in that I had for a couple of years, I felt credible enough to go hang out my shingle. And so I at least got the name and a little bit of a background in some holistic stuff, but then it was really ASAP that made me more credible with the energy psychology
and that
stuff.
Really gave you the drive to really move forward and just totally go with this.
And it was a very interesting kind of period for me when I opened my business, because I wasn't fully integrated in who I was yet as a holistic.
I was just going to ask around that and ask you if there was any nose crinkling of other therapists, like seeing the avenue or the direction that you're going into, because there could be other people that you have just totally motivated to go down this road, that they knew that they wanted to go somewhere, but they didn't know. If you don't know what it is, or you never heard of it, you know that there's something that's missing, or that there's a drive of something that you're searching for, but you don't know what it is that you're searching for.
Yeah.
So maybe they're you know, after listening to this podcast, are like, oh my God, that's what I was searching for.
Yeah.
So could you offer them any kind of advice? Did you run into any struggles with saying, oh, I'm going to be a holistic therapist now? And did you have any backlash from your colleagues or anything like that? Or what kind of advice would you give those people if this is the way or the path that they want to move forward in? You know, any naysayers or even maybe family members or spouses or, you know, sometimes our family members and the people that we care about most aren't always the most supportive in the beginning.
Critical, actually.
And they can be the most critical. I was trying to be nice about that. Eventually, I find that most of them will come around and be supportive, but initially it's not always the case.
Yeah.
So is there any advice, or did you have any struggles in that department? And if so, what are the lessons that you learned from them? And what advice could you give to other people that might be trying to follow in your shoes?
So I will first start by saying I started exploring my spirituality when I was in my late teens, early 20s. I will also say that my father was the first person to expose me to the law of attraction, ironically.
Wow.
Right? So my dad has always been a financial planner, and we would travel every summer to go to his business conferences with him as a family trip. And one I still very vividly remember, one time, I think it was in New Orleans where we went, and he went to his conference, and in the conference somebody presented the video The Secret. And he came back.
Those audio DVD or audio
CDs.
CDs,
Yes. So he came back all jazzed up from this. You gotta see this video. This is amazing. Blah blah blah. And of course, I had a fight with like my younger brother or something, and I was just like, I'm not watching this. And I was probably like 16 or 17 at the time. And he tried to get me to watch it. I wasn't ready. And then later on in my college
So
years,
not your brother, your father tried to
my
get you to
father
watch it,
tried to
and
get
you were
and
really
I was just in a
interested.
bad place. I was really mad at my brother. We were packing up to leave, and I wasn't ready to watch it at that point. Fast forward a few years later, and I am in my junior year of undergraduate school, and I was approaching my senior year, but I was short on my credits for my statistics. I was missing a credit for something else, and I was doing some summer courses over the summer through Rivera College. So I was doing this art and education class, and I was making this big, I don't know if you ever know, my favorite childhood book, It's Wibble, the Star-Touched Dinosaur. Have you ever heard of that book?
I have not. I've got a few years over you.
But you have kids not too far from my age, so I didn't know if you
that
had
was
heard
not.
about it.
That was not.
I don't know why, but I love this book called It's Wibble and the Star-Touched Dinosaur, and it was just like this little dinosaur. Ironically, you've been calling my computer a dinosaur tonight.
Yeah, the dinosaur.
It's Whipple, the Star-Touched Dinosaur. It was about a dinosaur that came down to Earth and discovered that all the dinosaur eggs that were sent from its planet that was like dying off were sent to Earth, and they were buried in the Earth, and found somebody that had a house made of all the dinosaur eggs, and he just needed to use his magic to wake up the eggs, and all the dinosaurs hatched so they could survive again. And it was just such a lovely story as a little child. I don't know why I loved it so much, but when it came to doing this art and education project, I thought, well, I'll just make It's Wibble dinosaur. So I'm in my living room making this, no joke, probably a 4-foot statue, like diorama. I don't even know how to describe it. Some sort of structure of It's Wibble the dinosaur. And I'm so depressed because I am behind my credits in college, not knowing if I'm going to graduate on time, ADHD and all that stuff. And I'm in my living room, and I'm just like, this sucks. This is my summer, and I can't even spend time with my friends because I got to be in summer school. And then I'm like, just looking around. I know I need to, because of my ADHD, I have to have something on in the background when I'm doing stuff to focus. I'm like, what can I put on? And I see The Secret on the DVD case.
Oh.
And I was just like, what do I gotta lose at this point? So I popped it in the DVD player, and I was just like, okay, this is really interesting information. And at that moment, I was in such a state that I was just like, might as well try some of this stuff out. What do I got to lose? And I went back, that was probably June of 2007, and I went back in September, again, having lost a bunch of weight, and just aligning with who I was. I cleared out toxic friends and all this stuff because I started using law of attraction. But fast forward, so I started doing the dabbling in the spiritual stuff, and I realized that I'm the weirdo in the family.
Oh,
And that's fine. I'm the woo-woo,
I am too.
right? And
Yeah.
so I feel
My
like...
younger brother calls it typewriter voodoo. My older brother, one year for Christmas, he bought me Psychic for Dummies. So
Yeah. So I started welcoming that at that point. I was like, you know what? I was getting into crystals. I was actually exposed to crystals for the first time by my own therapist in college. And I have a really interesting story actually about the crystals. So I wasn't sold on the crystals at first. And then I had a cat who was my companion cat that I'd had for many years since she was a teeny little kitten. And she developed some physical illnesses that we couldn't figure out what was going on. And eventually, she was living up with me at school off campus up in New Hampshire. And she got to a place where she wasn't eating at all.
oh.
And I tried everything. I tried everything that the internet said, like baby food and all different types of wet food and greens and whatever I could find to suggest, like, hey, try this, eat this instead. I even got her anti-nausea medication from a traditional vet. She threw that up, and I was just like, what the heck do I do? And then I remembered there's a holistic vet not too far, and so I called them up, and they're like, we have a 3-month wait list, and I was just like, the cat's not going to make it. She's been not eating for a week. So I was just like, well, what about this crystal thing? And I immediately decided to go up to, at that time when I was living off campus, I was up in the Sunapee area, and there was a great crystal store that's no longer there, unfortunately. It was called Gemstar Gemstone. And I went up there, and the guys that owned it at the time, they really knew their stuff. And I went in and I said, hey, I need the crystal that works on liver and gallbladder issues, because I knew that was the area that had some issues. And so they helped me open up the book, and they found a stone, and they found azurite malachite stone worked specifically on those things, and they ended up finding a bead that I could put on a hook that I hooked onto her collar. And I kid you not, within 1 hour of putting it on her collar,
She was a different kitty.
she started eating her regular food again.
Wow.
Nothing else happened. That was the only thing. And I was like, I'm sold. If this worked, I believe
cat that didn't eat
my
for
cat
a
that
whole
didn't eat
week?
for a whole week is suddenly eating her dry food with no problem an hour after I put the stone on her collar. And so after that, I was like, I believe in this stuff. I want to learn more about it. And then she became my guinea pig for any of the healing art stuff that I learned. So when I became Reiki trained, I did healing Reiki on her, and it helped her kind of work through whatever health issues that she was going on. She did have cardiomyopathy, so she did have, unfortunately, some heart problems, and unfortunately threw a clot and passed a couple of years later. But she was such a help for me on my healing journey. So I'm super grateful to you, Lila. And so, but in this whole journey, as I'm exploring all these things, hiding it from like my family, because what are they going to say? And eventually I had to be overt about it. And so when I decided to open my business, my name for my business kind of downloaded in my head years before I used it. I think it was like 3 or 4 years before I opened my business. I got the name for it, and I just locked it away in a little notepad, which I highly recommend to people if you're thinking about making a shift and you're not quite sure you're there yet. You start getting ideas, write them down. Write them down in a safe place that you know you can find them again, because they will be useful when you are ready. So I put down the name, and my name that came up was my business name, Awaken Holistic Counseling Services, AHCS for abbreviation. And when I started my business, I filed that, and I told my dad what my business name was going to be, and it's just like, Kerri, why would you name your business that? Don't you think that's going to turn away people? And I was just like, actually, no. I think it's going to draw the right people who are looking for exactly what I'm doing. And that's 100% what has turned out to be accurate. I was ahead of the game. My intuition was accurate.
Because all of this,
the future,
the awareness of holistic and alternative, and something that isn't necessarily cookie cutter, is becoming so popular now.
Yeah.
And people, you and I had talked about the younger generation, and how I believe, my belief is that they are really going to push and press for changes to happen, and everything around isn't going to have much of a choice but to conform and support that.
To adapt.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing.
So when I decided to do this, I set my name, I entered my business, but my identity still hadn't fallen into place quite yet. So I still giggle about it today. When I first started my business, I had one business card that was about me being a therapist, and then another business card that was about me being spiritual and doing Reiki. And I would just have them in my pocket for who I was going to give out which card to, and it felt so disjointed.
Yeah.
And then I just, again, had an epiphany download one day where I was just like, I'm not this or, I am and.
Yeah.
And I need
Yeah.
to combine both of them.
Yeah.
And as soon as I put my business together
Yeah.
and became the holistic therapist and was overtly, that was
Oh.
it. Then I started getting all the clients that were looking
Yeah.
for exactly that.
Yeah.
Who were
Because
like
you
the
were
traditional route.
authentically yourself. You
Exactly.
were aligned with what you were meant to be. You
Yes.
weren't trying to hide or pretend to. I think that's one of the biggest things, right? Is that if you're trying to copy someone else, or you're trying to be like someone else, and that worked for them. And I'm guilty of trying to do that, seeing these people who did all these group things online, and then I was like, mine just never really took off. All these people working remotely. I do have a number of remote clients that I work with,
Yeah.
but the majority of my clients, they really love to come in and see me, which I guess is a huge kudos to me.
Yeah.
But I think that is really a big part, and maybe sometimes if you're not that authentically yourself and not doing what really drives you and what is really what you want to be doing, I think that there's a block that prevents people from coming and helping you grow your business and expanding even as a human being, than if you truly are aligned with who you are. And it's the authentic you. I had people tell me years ago, they're not necessarily just coming in for the service, they're also coming in because of you.
Yes. You are your business.
You are your business, absolutely. So if your business isn't authentic and what you're doing in your business isn't authentic, the energy the energy
It's
that
felt.
people are going to,
Yes.
they might not
Connect
recognize it as energy, but there's something off for them. And they don't feel as connected or as aligned with your practice as otherwise they might be.
Yeah.
So
Yes. And so if you are a therapist who is looking to change dynamics, because maybe you also feel like you're a spiritual person and this stuff has always interested you, just know that it's possible to make that shift and that it is totally worth it, in my opinion. It is just so much easier to not have to hide your true beliefs about whole body perspectives, and that there are other things outside of just talk therapy that can be way more helpful in helping somebody heal. And even, I will say, even in our profession as therapists, we're not really allowed to use the word heal. Because,
really?
yeah, because it's technically, I think,
that's
a
technically
medical thing. Or like, you can't guarantee that you're going to heal. I don't guarantee that people heal, but I think people can heal themselves.
Absolutely.
And the tools that we provide to them assist them in helping them heal
I mean,
themselves.
they say that healing is an inside job, just like happiness is an inside job.
Yeah. And our bodies heal themselves too. So I cannot be responsible for somebody else healing, but they can be responsible for taking the tools I provided and healing themselves with it.
Yeah.
If I was starting off again now, going into this, one, I would seek out a mentor, potentially, which I did in my personal journey. I found a spiritual mentor of sorts, a teacher that could expose me to many different types of varieties of holistic modalities or holistic ideas. So my teacher, Barb, if you're listening to this, thank you. She exposed me to law of attraction. She exposed me to EFT tapping, actually. I wasn't ready for it at that point, but she did expose me to it.
You were so not ready for so many things that people just said,
And
Kerri,
it just took
you
time.
need to look at this.
It just took time.
Thank goodness for those people, right? They
Right.
got you to where you are now.
Right? And then she was also helpful in helping me get my Reiki certifications. Somebody through her facility, because she owned a business like yours where it was like a hub for many different types of practitioners to come in. And so she had somebody that was doing Reiki trainings through her. So that's where I got my Reiki training. And she just was a resource of somebody who was looking for supports she also ran my Law of Attraction and Abundance group. And so that's how I found her center in the first place. And she became a close friend. And I don't know where I would have ended up on my journey if I didn't have a teacher and mentor of some sort. So I do feel like that's a really useful thing for people if you're starting off and you don't really know where to go. Find somebody that can give you some directions and just pick which direction feels most aligned for you at that time to explore more. And if it doesn't feel like it fits, then leave it. And if you feel like you got to go this way because that feels better, then go that way. There's no one way to do it, and you not following what your intuition is telling you is going to lead to you being miserable at some point.
Yeah, and life is too short to be miserable.
Life is too short.
You gotta go after the dream and make the things happen. And if it's not meant to be, then it's not meant to be. But if you have dreamed about it and thought about it, but you don't pursue it, then the only thing you're going to be left with is, well, what if I did? Yeah. And I remember having a conversation with one of the doctors in the BioTalk system, and she was saying that what I do is still healthcare, it's just the delivery is very unconventional, right? And so she said if you're doing something that is different or people don't understand, that the most important thing is to be professional, right? And to dress professionally and do all of that. So, you know, if the name sounds a little weird or people aren't sure, it's like, oh, well, I don't know because awakened, like what does that mean? I'm not sure. But if the persona that you give or that you dress in a professional manner, you speak in a professional manner, you have a professional demeanor and atmosphere, then it's going to, Joy said, the weirder you are, the more professionally you have to appear.
Yes. And I will say, you have to be grounded.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that go into the holistic and wellness fields that are so like high flying and they're just off the ground. And even if they have some gifts to impart upon people, they are a little out of touch with the average person that's coming in to see you. That you might be able to give them a session and it might be great that one time, but because you're not grounded enough to reel them in, when they start to be ungrounded, they're not going to trust you as a practitioner.
Right. I would agree with that.
To take care of them.
Yep.
And then, you know, of course, you've got the guru thing, which I'm not a huge fan of. People believing that they are the one to lead everybody. You know, you are your own guru. That's what my perspective is. That you are the only person that knows what's best for you. And you might have many different guides along your journey, but you're the only one who can make the right decisions for yourself. So if it's not in alignment with you, and if it's not feeling comfortable and neutral or happy in your gut, then I wouldn't do it.
Well, I mean, just like our handwriting, everybody has to have their own signature. You can all learn the same way to write everything, but at the end of the day, after you make it your own, your E's are not going to look like my E's, even if we learn the same patterns, right? And that's what makes you. And I think that's equally important. So you can use somebody else's methods or their trainings or use them as a guide or a mentor, but if you're trying to copy someone else, then you're not going to be that authentic you, and you need to have your own flair, your own signature, your own process or way of approaching things. And I think that's going back to that authenticity, and don't be afraid to be you. In what you're doing. Know your stuff.
Absolutely.
Be good at what you're doing. Be good at what you're doing.
Don't misrepresent yourself.
Right. Know your stuff.
Know your scope of practice.
That too, yes. But be your version of what you need to be.
100%.
So where would you like to be in your practice, in your life, where you're going forward with all this? Where would you like to see, what would you like to see, or where would you like to be 5 years from now?
So I would say in 5 years from now, I really hope this podcast has made me like the Joe Rogan of holistic podcasts. So that's my holistic goal for right now. And then I would love for my business to be in its natural flow, welcoming in coaching and, because I am the holistic coach as well, welcoming in coaching and therapy clients regularly for care, as long as people feel like they are wanting that service and are finding it valuable. I would like to finally own my own home because our economy has gone the way we want it to, and be able to have a home that fits our family. And I would like to be the resource that people can trust in our culture, in our society right now, that has people's best interests in mind, that is fully empowering of you, and that you know that you can get authentic, ethical information from, because we so need that in our society right now.
Wonderful. So we didn't talk about the coaching part.
A little bit. The dating coaching.
Yeah, a little bit of that. But could you distinguish what the difference is between being a coach and being a therapist?
That's actually a really good question.
Because there's a lot of people that they're not really sure if they're not actually in that particular profession. They really struggle to determine, do I need a coach? Do I need a therapist? What's the difference? So can you distinguish those two classifications for us so that people have a better understanding if they're seeking people to help them out? What does one do versus the other?
Yeah. That's a very important question to have answered, actually, because there are some legal implications involved in that as well. So a coach is not allowed legally to talk about people's mental health, because you need a license to do that. You can talk about stress, you can talk about challenges going on in your life, but when it comes to anything mental health, anxiety, depression, any other mental illness stuff going on, I'm not sure if there's a line, may not be the same line for like drug addiction and substance stuff, because I know there's AA and there's the LADAX and stuff like that. But as far as mental health specifically, you are supposed to have a license to be able to talk about that. And trauma is also a kind of sticky situation with that, because trauma gets into the mental health. So if you are a coach and you are working on trauma, you have to tread very lightly with that. And you really need to be trained in trauma-informed care to deal with trauma. So if you are not, I wouldn't even touch that with a 10-foot pole, because there is so much liability potentially if you trigger somebody and they go into a psychotic break or something like that. You could end up getting sued, you could lose your practice, you could lose your home if somebody sues you because you didn't take care of them appropriately. And so when I have somebody coming to me, because this happens sometimes too, or they're not sure which way they want to work with me, because I do both, so I ask people what their goals are. Are your goals to work on symptoms that you have that are manifesting in physical and emotional ways? Or are you wanting to work on life alignment stuff? So career goals, getting habits down, that type of stuff. That would be more of a coaching thing or a dating specific approach. I can do EFT on coaching and therapy approach. I would just not use the same language in doing that. But as far as somebody who's choosing whether or not to go down the coaching versus therapy route, if you want to be a therapist and you're not a therapist yet, expect about 7 years of education required under your belt in college to get your degree. And then after you get 7 years in college, you then have to go on at least 2 years of pre-licensure training supervised hours. I think I don't even remember how many hours at this point. I think it's like 1,400 hours, if not more. And depending on the type of license you go for, whether or not you are a marriage and family therapist or mental health or a social worker, or you might have different requirements. But there's a lot more that goes involved, obviously, into the care and well-being for somebody's mental state. And so if you are considering it, I would also ask yourself on whether or not you have worked on your own stuff before going into the therapy field, because it will get triggered if you have not worked on it. Handle anything from your background, any of your own traumas, any of your own issues with your family, any of that stuff. Do your own counseling before you go into that type of field of work, because it can burn you out if you have not dealt with those things. And I think that's a big part of why we have so much burnout in the mental health field, because people are either, they haven't done enough work on themselves before they enter the field, or they are still living crisis and trauma experiences while they are taking care of other people in a mental health state. And you just can't do both. You have never...
Being someone, I actually have had a number of therapists as my clients, and I can attest that there are things that they have not worked through. And it does impact, I think, even their practice and the clients that they attract and things like that. And they definitely, we all have things that we have to work on, right?
Yeah. And ironically, you'd be surprised to hear this, the mental health field and therapists are not required to be in their own therapy. They are encouraged. They are not required. We also are not encouraged to have mental health days. If you work for an agency, if you work for a private practice, a group practice, they don't give you mental health days as a mental health worker. They expect you to figure out how to take care of yourself outside of asking for those things.
Well, I mean, you and I had this conversation earlier about even the hospital setting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the hospital wants their employees, their
Mm-hmm.
nurses, their doctors, and their assistants and all that to be super healthy.
Yes.
But yet they
Don't benefit.
benefit as much, but that they aren't necessarily overly motivated to
Or
actually
incentivized.
to have the patients be healthier,
Yeah.
because that is their bread and butter, and that is
How they make money.
that is how they make money. Yes.
Yes.
So, but is there anything that you would like to share with the people listening and for the
Mhm.
people watching?
Mm-hmm. I think I could probably wrap up on the reason that I decided to do this podcast.
Yes, please.
So the name Holistical was a download to me. So if you think it's spelled wrong, it's on purpose. And it's a brand name. It's not. Holistical is actually not a real word. I looked that up before I made that. Well, the Holistical podcast was a download I received from my own guidance system that basically said that with the coming in changes politically and the new focus that our country is going to have on healthy living, getting back to basics, removing chemicals, all these things that are important that haven't been done in our country for a very, very long time. My guidance said that there needs to be a hub where people can come find reliable, truthful, authentic, ethical information about the different options that are available to them. Because many of you who are listening may not have been given a heads up that any of this stuff was going on. And then all of a sudden, with this new Make America Healthy Again movement, you're starting to be made aware that, oh, these things have been intentionally done to us over many, many years. Our food system has been hijacked.
Right.
The medications are overprescribed, which people are starting to come to their senses on their own.
They are. Mm-hmm.
But that we have choice in this. And
That is
and
people
that is
that-
the new thing.
Right.
That
I
is a
didn't
new awareness.
know. So many people say, I didn't know anything like this existed. I
Yes.
didn't know that this could be helpful.
Yes.
I didn't know.
Yes. So now that this Make America Healthy Again movement is happening, people are going to start becoming aware that they at least need to learn new information. And so this podcast channel is to be the hub of that information, to be a place where you can find awareness of all the things that you were never told about in the allopathic world, all of the alternative, all the holistic, all the complementary medicines available to you that can help you to find more alignment and healing on your journey, so that you can feel empowered in your life and live your best life and find your health in ways that maybe you haven't been able to in the allopathic world.
Right. Because it's more than just the physical body.
It's more than just the physical body. It's more than just one symptom or one area of specialty that the allopathic world wants to, or conventional medicine wants to work and focus on. We really need to look at the entire body. And my goal on this channel is to interview experts. It is to interview people who are providing services of all different kinds to people to help find alignment and health and vibrancy again, being able to get back to their core values, how they were born naturally, where you didn't need medications to function, like being able to balance those things within your body, your organs, all those essential pieces of our living experience. Learning about the food system, what are the other options for foods that may not be the conventional foods, talking about non-GMO versus organic, talking about biodynamic farms, talking about all these different ways of living that are not talked about on mainstream media. And so come back to future episodes, because you are going to hear new information that you have never heard of on mainstream media that can give you the empowerment that you have been seeking to live the life that you want to live and feel your best. And so that's my passion. That is why I'm here. That's why I'm creating this opportunity for people to come to.
And we thank you for that.
Thank you.
For having that download, for having the drive and the motivation and the courage to start something like this that is very much needed, like you said, especially with the changes in politics and a greater awareness of our food and the ulterior motives of keeping people in this country unhealthy for financial gain by certain corporations and whatnot. And so so that's a very brave platform to be taking on. And so finally, I think that we can wrap things up, but if people do want to work with you or they want to reach out to you for resources or mentorship or whatever, how do people find you? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I am most active through my website. I am admittedly not great at social media right now. Hopefully I can attract a lovely social media manager for me. My website is very easy to access me through. You just fill out my contact form, and my website is www.awaken, H as in Harry, C as in cat, S as in Sam.com. And if you go on there, there are multiple tabs of much needed information. So I have holistic wellness tips that are free on there. I have this page for my podcast where you can find out where you can listen to it and watch it in many different places. I have information about ASAP. I have information about how to reach me for therapy services or coaching services. I have different dedicated pages for all those things on there. So definitely a wealth of knowledge. For therapy, you can also find me on psychologytoday.com. And my phone numbers and my addresses are on my website if you need to come find me in person. And then my social media, I am on Facebook. I do have an Instagram. And I tried to have a TikTok. And I'm not sure where those are all at right now. Hopefully,
you're braver than me. I have not ventured into TikTok yet.
They will be much more active than they are right now. And I also have a YouTube channel where this is going to be on if you aren't watching it right now. So you can subscribe to that. So yeah, you can find me on any of those things. And I will wrap up by saying, if you liked this podcast episode, if you like any of these episodes, please like them. Please share them with other people who also need to know this information, because there's not too many resources out there that are talking about this right now. And please subscribe to the channel so that you can get the first updates on when the new episodes are released. Without further ado, I think we can wrap up today's
I think so too.
Episode.
Thank you so much, Kerri, for
Thank you.
allowing me to take the seat of interviewing you, because your story it's great, right? And I'm glad that we had that opportunity today for you to share your story rather than just interviewing everybody else and people not really knowing your background, not really knowing your passions that you were able to share with everyone today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.